Hello, dear students. Today we're going to talk about one of the most important issues of the modern world, that is inequality. And unfortunately, we can see that inequality is happening in the many societies, both in the developing and developed countries. Moreover, it is happening not only between the countries, but inside the countries. And to the major extent, this is a very old problem that we can't solve in a moment. But a number of steps have already been done, so let us concentrate on the inequality. What actual impact does it for the global economy, for the global politics, for the national politics, national economies, and for our societies? So let us jump in. I'll just share my presentation with you. And as I told you, today, we're going to talk a little bit about what is inequality, what are the types of inequality, what are the factors that cause inequality. We will slightly touch upon the question of the inequality in the world in the comparative perspective. And also, we talk a little bit about the impact of inequality on society. But to start with, I just want to point that last year, 2019, was a really great year for Walt Disney, because you probably know that they started a streaming service that united actually both Disney, Pixar, Marvel, Star Wars, National Geographic, and even Fox Studios. So all these films and all these series you can now watch online for almost $7 per month. And that was a great start for the big business of Walt Disney Company. And what is interesting here that it actually put Disney into the race with the Netflix company that definitely know and love. So, and in 2019, you can see that Disney's net income was around 11 billion of US dollars. And overall revenue of the company was almost 17 billion of the US dollars. And it was without the start of the Disney Plus. And today they have more than 55 million of the subscribers. There is almost 30% of current Netflix users that has actually income almost 2 billion of US dollars in 2019. So that make definitely Disney one of the richest companies in the world. So according to the Fortune Global 500, it's number 150. It's much more richer than Pepsi, Toyota, or Christian Dior. And that start of the Disney Plus, of the streaming service, will definitely make Disney company richer. So that was pretty good start of the 2019 and 2020 for this company. However, this year was also connected with some of the troubles within the company. So Abigail Disney, that is grandniece of Walt Disney, criticized Disney company for the great inequality. You can see I posted here a link for the actually for the Washington Post article when she published her main ideas. So what is the main reason for that? So Abigail Disney stated that CEO of the Disney company, Bob Iger, makes 1,400 times more at the median payment of his workers. That was 65 million US dollars in 2018. And she calls executives to give their bonuses to the low-paid employees. And if you took the bottom of the company, the bottom 30% of the company, there are more than 200,000 of workers inside these companies. So you can imagine that the company is so huge, and the salaries of the CEO and of the administrative personnel is increasingly different. So 1,400 times. Can you imagine this? And what is interesting here, that according to the data that Abigail presented, Disney CEO salaries has grown by almost 937% since at the end of the 70s, while the average worker pay has climbed only 11%. So 911%. And this is tremendous differences, not only in the salaries, as you can see, but actually the salaries grows. And this was a big criticism, not only in the VP, so a number of Twitter articles and a number of the articles in different newspapers. So in any case, Disney company was accused for being one of the most unequal companies in the world. But they now took a number of different steps how they can measure this problem, but to make it fair, for example, the CEO was accused, but actually the CEO's salaries is 90% performance based. So that means if the company is doing great, so the CEO is getting more. But still, this is one of the very interesting cases that shows how the corporate business all over the world is doing right now. And it also shows the modern trends that are happening in the terms of inequality within the business sector. But we can definitely understand that those challenges and those differences in the wages and the payments, they also reflect the lifestyle, how we used to live. So this is not only about business, but it's also influencing the political, social, economic life in every country. And there is a good, really, article that I urge you to read by Walter Freak in the Harvard Business Review, that shows that this Disney trap, let's say, it's not only about the Disney companies. So he showed the inequality between the CEO and administrative staff that still remains in the business sector. And actually, what you get depends where you are working. That means that this gap between companies is not only between the CEO and the administrative staff, that is very obvious, but also we had a gap between different companies inside the one country, inside the one society. He also stated that there is a national character between firm wage gap. For example, in Portugal, this is one of the largest in Europe, and it's up to 40%. But the same cases you can see in the number of different countries like Germany or France or United Kingdom. And what is interesting here, that the new phenomena of the segregation of labor created. That simply means that the companies who would like to perform better, who are much more richer, they simply started hunting for the professionals, of the professional personnel, and they pay more to them, comparing with the companies who can't afford this, and so to the greater extent, we can see that it really depends not only on which country you are living in, or which conditions of the economic conditions, social conditions you are, but also actually which company you join. So if you're lucky enough, for example, to join like the top companies in the country, or transnational companies, that simply mean that you will have the better opportunities for your salaries to grow. Comparing, for example, with the companies who are not on the top list. But it's interesting in that case. So it's very obvious. So nothing strange here. But what is interesting here that in terms of production, in general, you're doing the same work. So you're doing the same work if you are top 5% of the companies, or the same work if you are more down. But actually, that is how the inequality is created. You're taking like the different amount of money for that. And so it really, Walter Frick comes to the one of the conclusions. There are many in the article, but one of the important conclusions that inequality among individuals is deeply intertwined with the fates of the company, whether through hiring, how they pay you, with their generosity, or actually the mix of both. And the cause of the unequal performance is both because of the over competition, because you compete for the best to perform the best, and actually the how you perform and how you work, the main influence of the performance of the company. Or, for example, the absence of competition. If in some of the markets the company is the monopolist, so usually they take control of everything, and it's very hard to compete with them. So they can limit the possibilities for the personnel, especially the low working staff, yes, to have the increase of their salaries. And in many of the Ukrainian state-owned, but not only Ukrainian, but in many of the state-owned companies of the post-socialistic area, we can right now observe and see this tendency. But what is interesting here that if we skip the concrete companies, and if we see the situation overall, we can see that in the terms when we have the increase of labor productivity in the high income countries, so the performance of company is better and the production is better, so the labor productivity is better. But the wages still are not growing so high how the labor productivity is growing. So sometimes in that terms, companies misbehave of paying you whatever you wish to be paying. And that created a number of different challenges that are not only of the economic reason, but also of the social reason. So that simply means, once more, according to the Global Wage Report, and this is overall situation in the world, that the top 10% of the earners in company, they usually get the same amount of money as, for example, the 50% of the bottom 50% of the earners, or of the earners in these companies. And on the middle takes the major 45%. So you can see how the different levels of the salaries are in the same business. And once more, it's very natural, so nothing strange in that. The only trouble it comes if we take into consideration, for example, the growth of the salaries, of the opportunities to earn more within staying in the one company. And here, unfortunately, we can state that a number of the social issues arise here in the equation, especially not only the economical equality or inequality, but also, for example, the gender inequality or the age inequality. You can see here, for example, then in the top level, the majority of the earners are actually men, for example, while on the bottom level, once more, in the average situation in the world, the majority of the earners on the bottom level are women. So we can see that it's not the equal tendency here. The same story, for example, with the age inequality. That sometimes a number of companies, and even if you look through the or the hiring companies, you can see that there are some demands for the age that also interferes with the equality issue. Yeah, but if you take, for example, this question of the increase of wages, you can also see that it's not only in their connections with the productivity, and it's not only the same, in the whole world, because in the different countries, we can see really the different situations. Well, for example, in the mostly developed countries, yes, we can see that the real wage increase, while, for example, in the emerging countries with the emerging businesses, with the emerging economies, so the growth is not so high. And definitely, yeah, we can see that overall situation is in the world is different. So in general, there is this tendency of the inside of the economies that we talk a little bit about the top and about the bottom, and for example, the social inequalities, it also happens. But we can also see that overall, the economic inequality in different countries is different. So there are many countries that have the other trends. So all of this is actually measured by the Gini index. It is famous index for the inequality, and we'll talk a little bit about it later. But here you can see actually how the world changed. Yes, so the more blue color, that means that the more equality is in the country. And here I just want to pay attention, you're talking about 2015 and later about Ukraine, so you can notice that it was pretty equal country. That is strange that, yeah, we have pretty high level of equality. However, and this is one of the minuses of the Gini index, we'll talk a little bit later, that it doesn't show that the country is doing better. It's just equality in the poor conditions. And the same troubles you can see in the other societies. While, for example, still we have the islands of inequality that is doing better a little bit, especially if you pay attention on the Latin America or on Africa, but still the problem exists. So this is like the general tendency in the world. So here we can state that we have globally, in the global scale, different kinds of inequalities. First, we have inequality between the countries, developing countries, developed countries. We have inequality within the countries. We also have inequality between different social groups if we measure, for example, by social class. And then do recommend you to, if you're interested in this topic, to read this book of Branko Milanovic, that is an expert for United Nations Development Program of the global inequality. It shows especially how different social groups perform in different countries and what are the general tendencies on the global scale between the top 10, between the bottom 10 and the bottom 50, for example. So, but in general, what is inequality, how we understand it? So, in general, this is an absence of equality, yes, so not so difficult. And, but here, what we understand by the equality in the scale of the society, we should definitely go into the philosophy of the politics or the moral philosophy. And one of the best, I think, resume here is actually theory of justice presented by the John Rawls in the 1970s. So he actually described one of the Jean-Jacques Rousseau's ideas about the justice as the state of the nature. So he come to the idea that the justice is a fairness. So if we have fair relations, they are just relations. And third, usually in terms of the society, it's simply mean the equal access to the distribution, or equal, for example, opportunities. That doesn't mean that everybody should be equal by the outcomes, but actually the equal conditions should be developed for everybody. But this is rather ideological factor that indeed is present in the studies of the inequality. So here, by what we understand by the equality, it's usually in the number of the articles and scientific literature, it's coming to the equal access to resources. So if you have, everybody has the equal access to resources, that's good. That simply means that you have this the equality stabilized in your country, fair distribution of benefits. Look here, not equal, but fair distribution of benefits according to the to the resources that you spent and to the labor that you spent in the production of services, and equal opportunities that you can establish. Some companies get revenues or the equal treatment for the law and a number of other issues. So if you, for example, let's take a case of this beautiful Sinavir lake in the Carpathian Mountains. Yes, so equal access to resources, that mean that you can enter this lake. So everybody can enter this lake. Definitely, it will be much more easier for the people from the western Ukraine, yes, because it's much more closer. But actually, if you are from the eastern part of Ukraine or southern part of Ukraine, you can take whatever plane, bus, and you can enter. So you have access to this lake. It's not limited. So that means this simply you have equal access to this resource. You can also have the equal opportunities. For example, if you want to ride a boat and there is a special price for this boat, so please, you can pay for that and you can get it. But let's imagine the situation in some businessman would like to make this lake as a private business and actually can stop the entrance to the lake and put some price. If the price is reasonable, it definitely could not be a major problem. But if the price is too high, and for example, he or she will build a hotel here, luxury hotel, so you know the stories, and then put an entrance price that is pretty high. That means simply that not everybody can afford it. And here we have actually the inequality distribution of the rights. Where there is a free entrance fee and you simply take some cost, for example, for cleaning the area, or for example, you can sell different souvenirs, or you can use boat to ride the scenery. Actually, it's forbidden here, but you can. Well, let's imagine you can do it. So you're earning by extras. That means simply that everybody has its will or the decision to enter the story, to pay or not. But if you put the entrance price, there is much more higher. That means that you are putting the preconditions when not everyone could enter it. Or for example, if you didn't manage to do the road for the people with disabilities, that means, and put on the steps, that means that they will be cut from the possibility to enter. So that's also limiting the equal opportunities. That is why, for example, in the major of cases, the access to the landmarks, to the lakes, to the seashores, and so on and so forth, is usually open in Ukraine, but not always. So students know some of the tricky things that is happening right now in 2018 and 20 with the lakes around Lviv. Yeah, but this is one of the examples how the equality and inequality is working. So can inequality be just? This is a question. Actually, yes. It depends on the situation. It depends on the conditions, and we can't take like in general talk about this. But actually, it's also depends on the ideological approaches, how have you come to this problem more in the philosophical manner. So, and the main approaches actually lies in the understanding of inequality as the result of the or precondition of the individualistic actions or collectivist actions. And there are mainly three major approaches to the issue of the inequality and justice. So the first is more about the libertarianism, and libertarians, if you remember the ideological classes correctly, they see inequalities as possible. Moreover, they are the outcome of the development of this society. And they do consider that they are permissible as long as they flow from voluntary actions. Once more, let's take this lake case, yes? If you have the free entrance to that, and if you, for example, would like to use the boat to ship a little bit in this lake, and the price for this boat is extremely high, but it's okay because if you want, you can pay, but it's not necessary for you to do this. Yeah, you have access to that. So they see that inequalities, they exist, they will be existing, and but when they are the outcomes of the voluntary action of the market, of the deals that arise in the market, that's pretty nothing to do, because that's how the free market economy is actually acting. Egalitarianism is the other, it's actually the opposite ideology and the logical approach to the inequality, and they state for more equal opportunities. That even in the case when you are putting a price for entering a lake, this should be, opportunities should be equal. For example, if you can pay for higher price, so you can pay for that, so it's nothing bad. But if you can't pay, so here could be a state, or could be like the private donors who can help you to pay for the entrance. So usually this approach is pretty good in the number of the socialistic state, that they do consider that the equal opportunities should be established, and the state should take more responsibilities to build these equal opportunities. One more, for those who can pay, it's okay, they can pay. For those who don't, so the state is taking this part. But actually they recognize that inequalities are not natural, so they are not these fair conditions. That are actually the unfair outcomes of the capitalistic development, and that is why the social issues should be stressed. And here the third main approach is utilitarianism. Yes, and the representatives of this ideology, of this approach, they actually stand for the idea of the overall happiness. And what can create this happiness? Can the overall society be happy when we have equality, or when we have inequality? And the trick here is that equality in terms of the overall happiness could be both positive and negative. For example, if for example the more richer people, they get too high taxes, you see in the number of countries this wealth tax existed. It probably could not motivate them to be rich more and more, and that's mean paying more and more taxes. So if they are increasingly high, when, for example, everybody is equal, yes, this also demotivates a number of people who try to be different a little bit. So, and we have enough information about the so-called the equal societies, as for example in the communist Soviet Union. Yes, so everybody was proclaimed to be equal. Does it make people happy? Especially when the freedoms were limited, and especially, for example, when we have still the party elite who was not equal to the major extent. So that's mean that equality could also bring the negative effects, because you simply lose your interest in to compete, to make life better, and by this do the greater performance. So whenever your approach is here, because it's ideology, there is no the right answer to this question, but still, I would rather be interested to hear your ideas. So please write in the forum what do you think. What is your approach? So which position do you think is better for you? But when we come to the types of inequality, so in the major extent, we can state that there are two major types. So this is economic inequality and the social inequality. Very often they're really interconnected. And usually in the economy and politics and social sciences, there are some differences between the more, for example, sociological approaches or more economical approaches. But here, what is interesting in the terms of inequality, different traditions, they actually come into to the same understanding. So economic inequality is usually we understand it through the income inequality, wealth inequality, and consumption inequality. And here, I just urge you to take into account that income inequality and wealth inequality, there are different things. So income is what you get by salary, and the inequality in salaries, for example, if in the same business, people who are older, for example, could get lesser salary than the younger people, but they're doing the same amount of the job. So this is income, this is salaries, this is income inequality. But the opposite, it's not opposite, but the different stories about wealth inequality. It's not only about your salaries, but it's actually all the wealth that you have, like the ownership of houses, cars, intellectual property, I don't know, dogs, horses, everything that you can consider by wealth. So please differentiate that these are two different positions. And this is actually how we can contribute to wealth. Yes, it's not only the story of incomes, of salaries, but in the major cases they are. So the salaries increase to wealth, but it is also, there are some of the interesting points here. Let's get back to them later. And the consumption inequality is actually what the possibilities you have in terms of the consumption of products or the services. And here it's not only the economic factor actually to consumption, but also of the social factor, especially if we, for example, compare, let's say, small villages and big cities. Yes, and the access to water, the access to the health infrastructure, access to libraries, schools, so on and so forth. So yes, we have inequalities usually even inside of the countries, the consumption of the services. While we're talking about the social inequality, we are talking mainly about the lack of equality of outcome. So this is distribution of rights, how we for example, the law enforcement activities relates to us or others, some of the social groups that actually are not required to behave to the law, and it's okay for them. Access to opportunities, so for example, in education, once more in the healthcare, so what opportunities you have. That doesn't mean that you will use them, but what access to them you have. And also sometimes we measure social inequality in the terms of the social class or religion or ethnicity or gender or age or whatever. So inside one country, there could be like minority groups who can't get the full access together with the majority of the country. So in that case, we will have this social inequality on the basis of let's say ethnicity, or let's say the basis of religion. So in the majority of the Asian states, so this religion factor is happening when the predominantly, for example, Muslim countries could have the unequal access to different services for the representatives of, let's say, of the Christian groups or the Buddhist groups. Even the conflicts can be created. For example, in China, that usually we have the religious inequality of different conflicts with different religious-based and ethnically based groups. And yeah, social class, it's more general, it's more structuralistic term. So that's all these factors actually contribute. What are the most important? What are the most influential economic factors or social factors? Actually, this is a great combination. So sometimes it's hard to differentiate, and actually everything can play a great role for your access to the opportunities. And let's see a little video on this topic.
Hey, line up! Line up! Everybody line up! We're about to race!
Probably you see
Everybody
that.
line up! Shoulder to shoulder, take off your backpacks. Basketball, line up, we're about to race. Hey, we are racing for a $100 bill. The winner of this race will take this. It's a $100 bill. Before I say go, I'm gonna make a couple statements. If those statements apply to you, I want you to take 2 steps forward. If those statements don't apply to you, I want you to stay right where you're at. Take 2 steps forward if both of your parents are still married. Take 2 steps forward if you grew up with a father figure in the home. Take 2 steps forward if you had access to a private education. Take 2 steps forward if you had access to a free tutor growing up. Take 2 steps forward if you never had to worry about your cell phone being shut off. Take 2 steps forward if you never had to help mom or dad with the bills. Take 2 steps forward if it wasn't because of your athletic ability, you don't have to pay for college. Take 2 steps forward if you never wondered where your next meal was going to come from. I want you guys up here in the front just to turn around and look. Every statement I've made has nothing to do with anything any of you have done. Has nothing to do with decisions you've made. Everything I've said has nothing to do with what you've done. We all know these people over here have a better opportunity to win this $100. Does that mean these people back here can't race? No. We would be foolish to not realize we've been given more opportunity. We don't want to recognize that we've been given a head start. But the reality is we have. Now, there's no excuse. They still got to run their race. You still got to run your race. But whoever wins this $100, I think it'd be extremely foolish of you not to utilize that and learn more about somebody else's story. Because the reality is, if this was a fair race and everybody was back on that line, I guarantee you some of these black dudes would smoke all of you.
So I hope that you got that idea. And it's really important when the coach is saying that all these steps in that race were not decisions of the people. There were conditions that people had to meet. And unfortunately, they can do nothing with that, but still they need to run their race. So that simply means the importance of different both social and economic factors and the policies that the state is taking, like to provide these equal opportunities, because unfortunately, due to many factors, you will never have this equal start. And unfortunately, this is happening. So we, as a political scientists, the future policymakers, should pay tremendous attention to the factors they cause the opportunities for different social groups. So how we measure, so to make the policy actions, we need to understand the nature. So how we measure inequality, because actually it could be so different, like in different societies. So please let's compare that you are earning $700 per month. In Ukraine, you'll be a little bit higher than an average, because average, if I'm not mistaken, in Ukraine, it's a little bit 300 and something US dollars. In India, you'll be in top 20% of the country. And in Germany, it will be quite difficult for you to live a month like earning this amount of money. So you can see how in different societies, the same amount of money can play different roles. So it really depends on the conditions. And usually we are using, like in the analysis, we are using these two types of the indexes. That is a Gini coefficient or index, and it's to measure economic inequality. So it simply means that if you have like closer to the zero, you have evenly distributed wealth and income in this country. Or, for example, if you're closer to 1 or 100%, sometimes Gini, so 1 or 100%, that means that one person in a group of persons has all the wealth and income in the country. So the lower Gini index is the better performance in terms of the equality. And this is one of the greatest measurement. However, there are different types actually of the Gini coefficient, of the Gini indexes. So you can find a number of them. However, please keep your mind on the some of the traps that this Gini index offers you. For example, if you look on this table, you can see that different countries can have the same index of Gini, but they can have the completely different situations. So you should always come to the context of the country, and only by the context of the country you can understand what does this Gini index mean, because in general it's just showing the situation, but it's not explaining too much. For example, you can see that if you have a group of people who are earning much more, and one person, for example, in the country B, earning not so much, it will have the same Gini indexes, for example, with the group of people who whose annual income is pretty the same. So it's very statistical. So please pay attention on that. The other idea is a human development index that is usually used, the social inequality, and is a combination of the life expectancy index, education expectancy, and income per capita. So you can see how this long and healthy life, yes, and the knowledge, expected years of schooling, so and mean years of schooling that create this educational index, and actually the GDP per capita are using together to do this index. You can use whatever you want for your analysis, for your data, but usually there are different combinations of them. Moreover, there are different kinds of, even in terms of the human development index, that is IDI, there is inequality adjusted human development index. You see here IHDI. That means what actually the human development index is the greatest number, the greatest measurement of the social improvement, of the social development, if inequality doesn't exist. What happens that if inequality exists? So here there is an inequality adjusted human development index. In nature also, if these two indexes are the same, that means that you have the very low level of the inequality. If these two indexes are different, that means that you have the greater level of the inequality. And if you count by the whole world overall situation, you can see that in general, for 2018, still we have a number of countries with the great, with a very huge inequality index, and many this is Latin America, South America, and especially Africa. And please, you can check whatever country you wish, but you can also see that even in the developed countries, like for example the United States, the Gini index, or the inequality, the level of inequality is pretty high. So here, this is a human development index. The greener, the better. Yes, you also see here how the social indicators of the development are actually much more higher in the developed countries. And here, even within the Europe, you can see the Ukrainian and, for example, Moldova or the Balkan state situation. Well, for example, the real trouble with the human development is in the in Africa and some of the Asian state. But for example, if you take the inequality dimension of the human development index, you can also see for 2018 how the world looks like. So the greener, the better. The greener, the better. And red is not so good. So that simply means that even if countries have high human development index potential, so the inequality is grabbing a part of this potential, and especially if you take into account Africa and both Latin America. So even if you have here the potential for the human development, you sometimes cannot afford to achieve it in your societies. So, and here let us compare. So one of the tasks for you, so let's compare it. So what do you think about your own country? So what do you think is the average wage in your country? And is it bigger or smaller with the region, region where you're living in comparing to the world? So please just right now guess. So don't try to Google, just guess data. Compare actually with the with some of the data. And what do you think is the level of inequality in your country according to the Gini index? Yes, and please guess also. Even you can stop this video and you can write your suggestions, your proposals. So, and how your country perform in the group of countries by income? Yes, high income country, it depends on in what type of country you are living in. For example, Ukraine is for lower middle income country. So what is your situation, not in the world context, but especially in this specific group? And what do you think is the share of national income going to the richest 10% and the richest 1% of the country? So how unequal is your society? How what is the share in the economy in terms of income that the privileged, the top are taking it? So the same, just guess right now, write your decisions, and then compare with the actual data to see how you understand the overall situation. And here, for example, the Gini index, it's actually showing this distribution. So it's a little bit answer to the previous questions, but you can go to the global wage report and actually see the real results. So we can see that even in the clusters of different countries with the high income, or for example, with the low income, the situation is overall different. But in generally, in 2018-19, the world situation was 35.5 out of 100, and you see that the high income countries are a little bit doing better overall, for example, but low middle income countries, I just put it here because Ukraine is here, is not so good. So please compare different types and always do this to understand how what is the performance of the specific groups of the countries. So what are the causes of the inequality? Definitely there is a different origin, and this is usually a mix of social and economic factors. So it could be structural reasons, for example, caste system in India or feudalism in the medieval Europe, that it depends on in what family you were born, and it's pretty prescribed the future, your future. So if you was born in the poor family, it was almost impossible in the caste system, or for example in the feudal Europe to have this, as we call it, the social lift possibilities, yes, to earn more and to have the better future. But also the private origin, the private reasons for origin, like the education, political motives, especially heritage and identity, because there are some minority groups, they are not interested, but this is not their lifestyle, for example, to get the higher positions. Yes, gender also depends on very private things. Institutional, the existence of the social lifts in the country. So once more, if the strict caste system, if you take in India in the ancient times, it was impossible like to upgrade yourself. But also the public infrastructure that we partly touched, for example, the differences between the small villages and the big cities. Let us say even now the access to internet. So we can definitely talk about the technological inequality as the part of the problem that can create different positions and possibilities for you. Taxes, the same story, depends on the type of economy, could be very equal taxes for everyone, could be taxes for wealth, so it really depends, but it also creates the situational differences. And also environmental hazards, especially, for example, hurricanes in the ocean areas that are happening, and with the number of the nations in the ocean countries, there's a great challenge for them how to develop themselves. They have the risk, they have always risk that the hurricane can come and ruin all the buildings, so they're not investing into their future. And this is one of the tremendous problems that is interconnected with the overall world's ecology. But if it took the main reasons of contemporary inequality, so I would rather say that this is growing importance of capital related to the labor. Yes, there is globalization combined with the technologization of the production, and also some of the institutional changes that and the institutional rules that favor richer part of the society. So it's become more structural, institutional things. Yeah, and it's important to see here that without like putting attention to these factors, you can always see the danger of coming to the poverty trap. When being on the low income and having low saving, it's pretty impossible for you to invest into the better future and to pay for the expensive decisions. So let us see how the actually each of these three reasons of contemporary inequality is working. So the basics of economic theory, you can your income can come from the two sources, mainly labor and capital. Yeah, I hope you know it. And the capital is distributed everywhere less equally than income. And we should always keep it in mind, because lots of people have their jobs, but not everybody has its own capital. Yes, so the distribution of capital is more unequal, unequal than the distribution of for example, of the income that would be equal. And usually, it's really important, because if we measure the developments and if we measure the growth of the capital, yes, by the usage of labor, we can almost judge the economic effects of the inequality. Well, what I mean here? I mean that how you can actually get your capital. Yes, there are two possible ways. You can save money from your wages, from your salary, and inheritance. And what is important here is just pay attention what is the most effective way to get capital. And you probably see the answer. So in the majority of the cases, this is inheritance. So the capital that was produced, earned not by you, but by your fathers, grandfathers, grandmothers, and so on and so forth, by your family previously, and that you get, and you can work with this, and you can increase this capital. So very, very little cases overall in the global world scale that you are getting more capital simply saving from your salaries. Actually, Tommaso Piketty, the Italian scientist, social scientist, in his book Capital, I do recommend you to take this wonderful book if you're interested more into the interconnections of politics and economy and society. So, for example, in his book, he stated that in France, about 70% of capital is actually gained through the inheritance. So it was not earned, but it was earned due to the rich families that you actually have. And if we use, for example, the real GDP per capita graphs, you can see how this inheritance and how especially the crisis can kill your capital building, because after the crisis, of course, during the crisis you're losing job, but then you can get the new job. So the recovery period is not so big. In some families it is, in some situations, but in general, overall, in the country situation, the recovery period of just get a job it's not so big. But when you lose your capital, it's much more serious. So you can see I took a few cases of United States, Kingdom, Poland, Ukraine, and Singapore especially. You can see, for example, how in the Ukrainian situation, the GDP per capita was crushed since its independence. And here you can see by the bottoms of this graph, especially for Ukraine, the major crises that were happening. The first at the end of the 90s, yes. Then you can see a few revolutions that were coming that also caused the crisis and also caused the this GDP per capita fall. While, for example, comparing to the other countries that were pretty developing in the manner of crops. So, and this is important here to understand that the capital, yes, the growth of capital is unfortunately, but it's more important for the development of the society and for the country than simply good salaries. That means simply that you should create conditions when this inheritance is possible, when the few generations can generate capital and give to the future societies, to the actually to you, to your children, so on and so forth. The next part of the story is actually that it's not only of the capital, but it's a main factor, but also labor. So labor inequality do consist, and in the probably one of the outcomes of the globalization and technologization of the process. So globalization increased in demand for the highly skilled labor and decreased in demand for the less skilled labor. And it's also pretty natural. We talk a little bit about this. So that means that the big companies, they're not only concentrated here in the country, they can access whatever you wish, and especially with the technology, so you don't need to work for the company of your country. You can stay, for example, somewhere in the islands, like do this downshifting, yes, produce your activities in internet and get money. So that's mean, but you should be skilled enough. So you should be educated enough to do this. While for the low, less skilled labor, that is important. This is impossible. They are more concentrated on the actual job that are happening in the area. So their mobility factor and the mobility index is much more lower than, for example, with the highly skilled labor. And poor workers in the rich countries faced increased competition from workers with the poor countries. That means that they can't demand high wage, because there is always somewhere to come and to do this job for the lower salary. The tremendous problem in the developed countries, and some of the developed countries, they choose the tactics, for example, Germany, they choose the tactics that they need foreign labor and low paid labor, and they are more interested in creating the more production than protecting their own citizens, and they can do it with the new labor. So this is so-called factor as a battle for the down, so the battle for the poorest, because once more, in the economical terms, the price of your good, or for example of your services, both like the resources plus labor, the natural fact. So if you can make the workers, so I mean labor, less paid, that will definitely influence on the price of your product and service. So in the many societies, there is a battle for the down. And one of the great illustrations here, I do recommend also to read this, is the book of Pietro Rivolli, The Travels of the T-shirt and the Global Economy. Wonderful book that showed how this battlefield for the down in the textile industry is happening in the world, and how the developed countries compete for the down, for the less skilled but cheap workers in the developing countries. But also this is a technology that increased the demand for highly skilled labor in rich countries, and therefore also increased the wages of people with higher skills. So the same business, yes, case that we were talking about in the Disney case, or in the Harvard Business Review article, yes, that the tops are getting more and more because they are tops, because they are very skilled. And here, if you take the Gini index, also compared a few countries, you can see that this situation is actually how dangerous this is situation in the United States. That this is inequality mainly because of the labor, because of the, and we will see it later, is happening in the United States, comparing, for example, like United Kingdom or Japan or France. Yes, so here in the United States, from almost 35 points, they get more than 40 points in less than the 30 years. However, this approach doesn't explain why inequality has risen faster in some countries than in other countries. And here actually comes the other approach, this institutional changes that actually favor rich. And while there is a battle for the bottom, there is also the battle for the top that cost higher salaries in the corporative sector. And you can see here on the chart that inside of the 500 top companies in the world, so the average total pay for the tops was going rapidly, let's say, in the end of the 90s, comparing, for example, with the other administrations. So this really exists, yes, and it's not only happening in the salaries, but it also in the other institutional changes, like the growth and the regulation of the financial sector. This means the state is paying less attention to that, and the companies have the right to do this. For example, the decline of labor unions that were pretty popular in the last century, let's say, and that are combined with the socialistic movements. Yes, but still they were trying to regulate these inequality rates in the number of companies, and also reduce taxes, for example, for top incomers in the number of societies. I do believe that you remember all these cases, for example, in France, how the number of the rich people, they simply left the Texas area because they want to save their money. So this three actual reasons. So the growth of the capital relative to labor, globalization and technologization of the process, and institutional preservation of the rich earnings of the rich is actually creating the current situation that we have right now. So what do we have overall in our world? So right now we have the situation that the 26 richest people in the world has as much wealth as 50% of the global population. Once more, 26 richest people in the world have the same amount of wealth as 3.8 billion of the poorest people, according to the Oxfam report. And this is unbelievable, like difference. Once more, it doesn't mean that everybody should be equal, but the development and the growth of this inequity is really huge. So from 90s till 2015, the share of income going to the top 1% of the global population increased in 46 out of 57 countries with data according to this report. So that simply means that inequality is rising. And in more than 50% of the 92 countries with data, the bottom 40% received less than 25%, yes, of overall income. And that's also is shocking, because you can see how the bottom is not earning more, but actually losing. And rising inequality is not only the one way forward, fortunately, and we have also data that between 2010 and 16, the incomes of the poorest 40% of the population was growing. So that simply means that inequality is not for ages, that inequality is not inevitable or not irreversible, that you simply should work with this. And here on the graphs, you can just take a pause and see it. You can see how the actually in the number of countries, the top 1% net personal wealth share, and here the income share. So the wealth, actually the countries are losing a little bit, but here you can see the growth, yes, on this lower chart. And here in the incomes, you can see that the income of the 1% are also growing. And here, if you compare about the World Inequity Database, I urge you also to use it for your researches, that bottom 50% national income share, you can see here that it's declining. So this 50% are not becoming richer. While, for example, the top 10% are a little bit the same, but are growing in this selected countries, especially if you take, for example, to account like United States or for example, Poland in this case. So in generally, it comes, it's greatly described, all these outcomes in the world, by the elephant diagram that I hope you know. So, and it's showing how the global elite is becoming more and more richer in the personal distribution of cost, while, for example, the poorest, they still locked out of the crops. And the major also increase was done in the emerging market middle class. So the new boomers, the Asian, mainly the Asian state, and definitely the decline of the developed world middle class that we have here. So this is outcomes of the globalization and of the technologization, at least from this period of this 20 years. So as I told in the middle of so it was in 2012, I think, that this data was a little bit reconsidered, and there was not so elephant diagram, turns out. But in general, the information in the next, the top 1% captured 27% of total growth, while, for example, bottom 50% captured only 12% of the total growth. So richer becoming richer, and the poor are not becoming rich enough. And yeah, and because that is important, the squeezed bottom 90 in the US and Western Europe, that was on the same level. And once more, if we take the social distribution, not by country, but overall this distribution, you can see that less than 1% they have the almost 46% of the global wealth. Well, for example, the majority is 70% have the 2.7% of the global wealth, and this dimension, so this inequity is growing rapidly. And you can also notice it if you compare the Gini indexes of the countries of different regions. You can see that, so the lower here is better for the countries, but you can see that the majority of the countries of different regions are simply situated in the middle, so they didn't move too much, except, for example, India, China, here the United States, they grow a little bit. And you see the number of the African countries here in that corner, where the inequality rate in the 15 years perspective was pretty high. So the general idea of that slowly but still inequality is not resolved. So it's happening in the number of cases. And here you can also see how the income shared by the 10%, the richest 10% of the country is going down a little bit in the number of cases, but here I just selected a few cases of the development countries, here especially Ukraine, but in Argentina, in the United States, so it fell out a little bit in Argentina, but still this is one of the problems for their societies. But what is interesting also, if we compare in the developed countries, what the situation is happening, you can see that in the English-speaking countries in the United States, Kingdom, Canada, Ireland, and Australia, the top 1% lose in 70s and 80s, but then we have the growth, so it's a U-shape. But for example, in the countries of the continental Europe and plus Japan, you can see that their percentage was going down and pretty kept the same. So we could see different national peculiarities of the states. So how much should you earn to be in this 1%? You can see by the country, but this is income, so no, it's not wealth. But you can also see what the big distribution is among different countries. So these inequality rates in terms of the costs that are created by the labor, yes, totally different in the number of the societies. And this is a huge, to finish with it, this is a huge problem that we can see can have the positive effects. So, but overall, in worlds we are not becoming more equal, and this is one of the main topic for the UN Global Development Goals that was adopted until 2030, with very concrete tasks that you can see here. So overall, the United Nations, they recognize that inequality should be reduced, and every country that is signatory to this process have its national task, how and what should they do to reduce the problem of inequality. And you can see here by the tasks that it's not only about the economic factors, but mainly a number of them is about the access, and so the social inequality, the social inequality issues. What is the impact of inequality? So actually there are a number of impacts, and I don't recommend you to see one video after that. It actually is focused on the social impacts of the inequality, but in the major scale, this is decrease in national income, because poorest, they usually spend their main income on these necessities, and if they pay more for something extras, they usually then they consume. They usually they are not paying for that through their earnings. That means that there are some debt issues, and somebody should work with the debt. And usually, this is a huge problem for the economy of the country if you create too many debts. Yes, then concentration of wealth and income in the hands of one person or few people can create monopolies or oligopolies and this oligarch troubles that are happening, that are limiting also the not only economically but the social terms inequality, mainly access to the resources, to the powers, to the access to the possibilities and so forth. Also, it causes a social polarization, rich, poor, and this all the socialistic or leftist issues, and also populistic issues. So they are really, really interconnected, but also in general sense, the segregation. So in the many of the biggest cities, people are trying to get their job, but they can't get their job. So this is how the ghettos are created, and even you can find ones that you have really pretty good developed cities, but you have ghettos around the city. So this is also how the cities are developing, and also impact on health, both physical and mental health, because people face different problems, starting from the criminal, then the mental health issue that they can't afford something physical because they're not spending more on ourselves as a labor force. And that means that somebody should spend this. And that means that there are more state spendings of the state systems, both for medical infrastructure, for the, let's say, for education, and for the other issues. So overall, the impact of inequality is not only measured in the economical terms, but has tremendous influence of on the social problems. And to finish up, I would rather say that the one of the most impressive when the inequality is institutionalized. So this is a picture of the two cities that are called Nogales, and these are both cities in the United States and in Mexico. And you definitely can see, yes, the line, the border between the states, and you definitely can understand where is the Nogales in the United States and where is the Nogales in Mexico. So if it is institutionalized, inequality institutionalized between countries, you can see that it becoming one of the factors of the country's development, and why nations lose. By Acemoglu is one of the books that also focused on this institutionalization of the inequality. So here in the United States, you can see the concentration of the houses is not so big, because here people are interested, like, to come more closer to the richer lands and having the possibilities to act here. But what is interesting here, if you compare Mexico, like the North Mexico, the South Mexico, you can see even bigger inequality in that terms. So you should understand and take into account that inequality is both social and economic phenomena. We can observe it in different ways, mainly in the social groups, overall in the world, both richest and poorest. We can observe it between countries. We can observe it inside of the countries. And inequality usually between countries is larger than inequality within countries. But actually it's fading, it's going down. But within countries, this is very hot issue, and it's happening almost everywhere. So we were talking a little bit, for example, Portugal and the United States, they have more inequalities comparing, for example, with continental Europe. However, income is distributed unequally. The problem is in wealth that is distributed more unequally. But actually, wealth, this is the main reason for the development, economic development of the country, and equality in the terms contributes to the overall development of the country. There are different reasons for the contemporary inequality, but the major are the growing capital importance, comparing with the labor importance grow, globalization and technologization of the process, and institutionalization of wealth. And in terms of impact, it can decrease national income overall, create monopolies or oligarchies. It causes the social polarization and the segregation in some cases, especially in the cities, and also cause a number of different health challenges that state should pay more to actually to solve it. These are some of the additional readings. If you are interested in this topic, especially I recommend you to look for Our World in Data. All the updates are here, but also pay attention on the World Social Report by the United Nations, because there are really recent updates on the topics. So I do hope that you got the clear understanding of the inequality issue that is really, really broad. I do recommend you to look through this additional literature, but pay attention to the main literature that I presented to you, and take this challenge of combating inequality as one of the very serious problems in our world. So please be prepared and concentrated to solve it, because it will be our future. So thank you.